Yes, we definitely do. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. This webinar, Patch Management Simplified, how to build efficiency and secure hybrid work. We hope that you'll find it insightful. Just a little housekeeping here. If you have any question throughout the whole webinar session, please send your question in the chat on the right column or the right-hand side of your screen. And if we do not have time to get through it today, or if you think about more questions after today's session, or even if you're watching the recording later on, please feel free to send your question to accounts@jumpcloud.com. So let's take a look at some of the upcoming highlights or events from JumpCloud that we think you should join. Tomorrow, there's actually an IT hour session that is open up to JumpCloud customer. So you're welcome to join us. We have more of Scott and Tom during that session. And next month, we actually have another exciting webinar that you might be interested to join. It's unifying SSO and MFA to reduce IT complexity. So we'll have a great customer and a great speaker during that session. And don't forget to join our community, join our Slack Lounge channel. And also, you know, if you have time and have more questions, do join our weekly product demo where you can meet with subject matter experts from JumpCloud. And I believe we have some of the links included in the chat that you can hyperlink and join today if you want to. And okay, my name is Joanna Ng. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for JumpCloud. I'll be your host for today. And today I have two esteemed panels or speakers with me that I have the pleasure to work with every day. We have Tom Bridge, Principal Product Manager, and Scott Reed, Senior Product Manager. So I'll leave the two to do a very quick self-introductory, and maybe we'll kick off with Tom first.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Joanna. And you're right, it's a great pleasure to work with you as well. So I really enjoy our partnership between product marketing and product. So hi, my name is Tom Bridge. I'm the Principal Product Manager for Apple Technologies here at JumpCloud. I've been with JumpCloud just over a year. Prior to that, I spent 15 years running an IT MSP here in the greater DC area, focused on Apple device deployment. My whole career has been enabling Apple devices for the small to medium enterprise. And now I'm doing that at scale with JumpCloud here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thanks, Tom. So Scott Reed, longtime JumpCloudian. Actually, prior to joining JumpCloud, similar to Tom, I was an IT practitioner with a huge focus on mobility and enabling remote work. At JumpCloud, I joined on the support team way back when we were 40 employees and had the opportunity to really grow with JumpCloud. Was one of the founding members of the JumpCloud PowerShell module and helped bring JumpCloud MDM to life and also bring Tom to JumpCloud. So excited to be working with Tom and Joanna. And with that, let's dive into our webinar today.
Awesome. So a quick agenda, we'll be talking about the importance of patch management. Tom will go through that, and then Scott will talk more about the JumpCloud patch management solution. And from there, we hope that you can see how easy and simple to use to solve all your problems. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to open up to our panel discussion. So please feel free to put in your question at any time you have one during the presentation. So with that, let's kick off with Tom.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joanna, for the wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here today because this is a really important topic. It's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I feel like this is probably one of the biggest things that any IT manager has to worry about, any CISO needs to worry about, any CTO needs to worry about, not to mention our folks on the IT front lines every day in the help desk and the service desk. So I want to lay the groundwork for why this matters and why patch management is so important. You're here today because you understand that you need to patch your environment, and you're very interested in how we're approaching that particular problem. And I think it's important to kind of lay the groundwork for the world that we're in today and why patch management matters. If we think about where we are today, this is the golden age of cybercrime. You need only look at the number of vulnerabilities that are out there and announced every year, And again, I've got a chart going back to 1999 all the way to the end of last year. If we look at where we are, there's been a huge spike in the number of vulnerabilities that have been published, the number of vulnerabilities, not just for operating systems, but for third-party applications. But if we look at the causes of the kind of breaches that we're seeing these days, items 2, 3, and 4 for missing operating system patch, missing app patch, and operating system misconfiguration are things that you have in your control as an IT professional. You can do your best with phishing, which is the #1 cause of breaches, generally speaking. But when we look at what causes a phishing attack, you have a lot less control over how that operates as an IT admin. When it comes to insider threat and credential theft and brute force, you also have much less control over that environment. So let's think about, as we look at the causes here for individual problems, what we want to do is focus on where we can bring the most leverage as IT practitioners. And so that's where we start to look at this problem. And when it comes to security, imagine for a minute that you're walking in the woods. You and some friends are going to have a great picnic and you're going to enjoy the scenery. Scott is out there in Denver, up in the mountains. There, go take a look at the woods, spend some time in, the environment. What do you come across? You come across a bear. Well, we all know that bears are very dangerous, and grizzly bears, particularly like this one, you're going to have a bad day. The bear's going to see your picnic basket and they're going to go to town. So what do you have to be faster than? So here's where I tell you the unfortunate truth. You don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than your friends. And so when it comes to security, that's how you have to approach your environment. You want to make yourself a much harder target than the other people who are around you. And so when we think about doing that, keeping your operating system up to date, keeping your apps up to date, keeping your software together and managed centrally and deployed is all about making your environment much more secure from attack. You want to not be the low-hanging fruit, the slow person out in the field when you come across a bear, because then you're a very attractive target. So how do we deal with this? I want to talk a little bit about the software development life cycle that goes from release to review to adoption to maturity. These are the 4 major pillars of the software development lifecycle. And so we've got to think a little bit here about how we approach this problem as IT practitioners, generally speaking. And I kind of want to go over the phases of this environment. So we'll start in the bottom left-hand corner with release. How do you know when there's a new version of the operating system? When you might get told that you get a pop-up in the upper right-hand corner of your macOS device. You might get a pop-up in the lower right-hand corner of the system tray on your Windows device that's going to tell you, hey, by the way, there's a new version of the operating system. So the questions are that IT needs to deal with, and I'm putting kind of questions and activities here on the right for you to think about as IT practitioners. How are you looking for new versions of the operating system? What's your relationship with those particular vendors? Do you have an alerting process to help you keep aware of what's going on? Are you testing beta versions or pre-release versions of the operating systems? Are you members of the Appleseed for IT program at appleseed.apple.com, which will give you that ability to take a look at new releases before they actually ship? Having a good relationship with your software providers, especially your operating system providers, is going to give you a heads up as an IT professional. It's going to give you that warning siren that something new is coming and that you may have some concerns about that environment, generally speaking. From release, we go into review. We need to be able to test when there's a new version of the operating system. Does it install correctly? Does it launch? Does it still boot when I get to the other side? Are all of my tools still available to me? Recently, macOS 12.3 was released, and the system version of Python, the very popular scripting language, was suddenly not part of the operating system anymore. If you wanted to rely on there being a copy of Python on the device as a runtime for scripts that you're managing devices with, or as part of tool chains like Microsoft Defender for macOS, in fact, was using the Python 2.7 module that was available on the system, and they needed to make some updates. If you were the admin and suddenly your antivirus tool didn't work when you updated the operating system, you might have a problem. So essentially, as part of that review, you've got to be able to go through that process of testing and to make sure that everything that you're building, everything that you have built, still operates on the new version of the operating system, so that when you go from Windows 10 to Windows 11, you're ready and you know that every piece of the software that you're deploying, that you are using on a regular basis, is still compatible and still operating well, not to mention more secure. So how do you pilot those changes? How are you actually testing those out within your environment? And then, of course, does it play nicely with others? That's always the big question. There are some, legacy manufacturers here who are operating a little bit in the past. And if you have tools that, still operate in that particular manage, these are oftentimes line of business applications that are really crucial. You've got to have a good and full understanding of how those are participating in your environment. So as you look at all of these things, these are the things you get to weigh as part of that review cycle. And then the question is, how do we get that from review to the field through adoption? You have to start thinking about this in multiple different ways. You've got to think about who gets this first. Do I want to trust IT's perspective and say, IT says it's a go, so it's a go for everybody? Some organizations, that's absolutely going to be the right approach. Other organizations where there are legacy workflows or hardware dependent workflows, you may want to slow that process so that only some of the workstations are updated on day 1 or day 10 or day 30, so that you can make sure that everything is still as you would expect it to be. And that's the other question. What's the importance of this particular update? Is this a security update that fixes a nasty 0-day? Well, you may want to have a much shorter implementation time frame than you normally would. Or for an update that maybe has some features but doesn't have a lot of security content, you might opt to go with something that was a longer deployment cycle. From start to finish, how many days do you have available to you to complete that update cycle? And then last but most importantly, what's the end user experience around that update? Is that a friendly process? Is that a place where your users are going to understand the concept that you're putting in front of them? Are you just putting another alert into their queue? I know that, if I were to look at my iPhone right now, I could see that I have no less than a dozen alerts on my phone, and it's only been asleep for 10 minutes since we just got started. So we think about the notification streams that we put in front of our users at all times. Are we putting the right notifications in the right places at the right times to make sure that they are doing the job that we're asking them to do? So, and lastly but not least, we end up in the maturity cycle. This is the dream, right? This is the homogeneous fleet that is always up to date. But being up to date or having patch management down on lock means that you get to do some tasks that you might not otherwise get to do. Reporting and audits. These are super important in our 2022 timeframe, especially for organizations that have SOC 2 compliance needs. Being able to show at a glance what your fleet looks like to key practitioners like your CISO or your CTO or your internal audit manager, being able to give them access to tools that are going to show you, yes, we think about patch management here at PretendCo, and we're focused on delivering a great solution for the future. It also gives you a chance to talk with your software manufacturers. Gives you a chance to free up from the 9 to 5 firestorm that can be the the help desk, and talk with your software manufacturers and partners on feature requests. Gives you a chance to do new software reviews, generally speaking, which are super important parts of making sure that you're using the right tool at the right time for the right reason. And then last but not least, preparing for that next cycle. Because we all know that soon after the release and adoption of a new version of the operating system, whether that's Windows, macOS, or Linux, you've got a new test version that you should probably be testing as well. Right now, macOS 12.3.1 is the most current version of the operating system. However, we're on beta 3 of macOS 12.4. And so, as we go through that process, these are layered cycles that repeat over and over and over again. Planning for a good maturity cycle lets you start the release process all over again. So if we look at some of the recommendations from organizations on what you need to be doing to patch your environment, our friends at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security here in the United States, has 4 major recommendations for how you should approach patch management. The first of those things is to enable automatic software updates whenever possible. Now, I always think of that as that's a great guideline, and I certainly appreciate the value of what they're going for. However, for an automatic fleet, are you sure that every one of those updates isn't going to introduce a bug? There was a bug in Windows 10 back in January that rendered all PPTP VPNs completely useless. And it was in the product for a couple of days before they were able to stop rolling that out, and then a week before the environment was patched. In a good patch management environment, IT would figure that out immediately, and during the testing cycle, prevent other users from disabling their own VPNs. So those are the kind of things that, you know, you've got to balance. That story of balancing between automated updates and good experiences for your end users is a really key part of that. In addition, you know, we think about, you know, CISA recommends not using unsupported end-of-life software. And so that's a really great recommendation. Should I still be on Windows 8.1? I should absolutely not. Should I still be using macOS 10.14 Mojave? I also should not. Should I be using a very old version of Ubuntu 16.04 LTS? Also probably no. Those are all platforms that may be in use in your environment, but they're no longer receiving security updates of any kind. And those are dangerous risks for your organization that you may need to offset with countermanding controls. They also make 2 other very interesting recommendations: to always visit vendor sites directly rather than clicking on advertisements or email links. Who here has ever supported a user who said, well, I just Googled for flash updates, and then hilarity ensued. That was a fairly common occurrence at my previous place of employ. We would have to deal with the consequences of that all the time. In addition, you should avoid doing software updates while using untrusted public networks. This is a great case where I think the recommendation is a little stronger than it needs to be. Most updates these days are handled over transport security layers or transport layer security, so TLS. Which is a secure channel between you and the other side. However, if you had to sign into a captive portal first, maybe that's not their certificate on the other side, and certificate pinning isn't as common as we'd like, generally speaking. So using secured networks that you trust, like your home network, may be more valuable, or your office network for those of you who have returned to the office. I think that's a very valuable part of the advice here. But of course, what we're talking about here is very US centric, and they're certainly not the people making decisions for all marketplaces. Our friends at the National Cybersecurity Center in the UK have a Cyber Essentials security recommendation. Their Cyber Essentials platform, which also includes an audit and a certification, will allow you to do business with government and local government entities there in the UK. Their statements are very, very clear. Software, including the operating system, must be licensed and supported, and it must be removed when it is not. And then, most importantly, if there's a critical or high vulnerability, that software must be patched within 14 days of being identified publicly. So you think about those kind of situations, that's going to compact your time frame substantially. You have to have a plan for how to deploy these updates. So this kind of takes us to a very interesting topic, which is what's end of life, really? We all know what it means to be licensed. I feel like that's a pretty common, thing for us to worry about. You've spent money to acquire a license that's legal from the company that's deploying the update and doing those things. I think that that's perfectly natural. That's a normal part of life. However, end of life is a little trickier to determine. We have very different environments here between Windows and Apple and Linux. They give us very different environments in terms of what's actually end of life. I love what Microsoft does here, and if you're an Apple person out there who knows me, you know that that's hard-won praise. Microsoft gives very clear understanding for what is the end of life for a given update. For a version of Windows 10 that's released during the first half of the year, that's 18 months after it was released. For a given build, it will be supported. For those in the second half of the year, they give you 30 months of the release date. for, again, Windows 10 Enterprise, Windows 10 Education, and then also on the Windows 10 Pro and Pro Education side, you've got 18 months from the release date from either side of the year. So that's the important thing there. If we go and we look at not just what Apple or what Microsoft's going to tell us there about Windows 10, for Windows 11, and we'll go back one, Scott. There is a Windows 10 Enterprise. Windows 11 Enterprise gives you 3 years of support from release date. And again, that's for the server for one release per year. They will support that release all the way out for 3 years. For Windows 11 Pro and Pro Education and Home, it's 2 years. But they're telling you exactly when, exactly when things will happen from there. So it's really exciting to see a clear delineation of what's end of life, so that IT admins have clear, bright lines. When we go to macOS, it's a lot less clear. This is a chart from eclecticlight.co, run by Howard Oakley, and it really gives you a good understanding of what's the time frame for security updates, what's the time for maintenance updates, and it's a lot less clear. It is somewhere between 272 days and 367 days for how long that maintenance window is for a given operating system. That's when new features may be delivered, new bugs are quashed, and security updates are applied. And then for that first year, you're going to get a ton of releases. You're probably going to get somewhere between 12 and 18 releases. There's no schedule. Apple does not have Patch Tuesday. Apple releases software when they deem it to be ready. And then from there, you go from station keeping into security updates. And so most versions of the operating system receive security updates for a longer window. We have definitely still had software update releases for macOS Catalina, which is 10.15, which is now probably approaching approximately 1,000 days old. And so if we think about that, what's the end of life for this whole process? Apple doesn't say. Apple doesn't tell you when it releases the final version of an operating system. It does not tell you when that version is end of life, and it does not tell you when it will stop receiving security updates. So as an admin, you need to probably adjust to Bridges' first law of software updates, which is the most recent version of the operating system is the most secure and has the most security updates and CVEs, or common vulnerabilities, addressed. And so you need to deal with that. So all of this gives us a very well-painted picture on 2 key values that represent the most of patch management and why you want patch management for your environment. The first of those is predictability. Predictability is about reducing coworker friction. It's about reducing the friction your coworkers experience when they're not sure what their coworkers are using. Are you spread out between macOS Mojave and Catalina and Big Sur and Monterey? There may be very different user experience and sharing controls and operational functionality of those 4 different operating systems. That's causing your coworkers friction in terms of knowing what to do. It causes you as an admin friction because you have to deal with additional cognitive load supporting multiple different operating systems that do things in a very different way. In addition, supporting fewer versions of the operating system provides it reduces the number of variables in your environment. And that's substantial when it comes time to supporting third-party software as well, because it's not just enough to support multiple versions of the operating system. You need to support multiple versions of third-party applications as well. And now you're having to manage a matrix that's much, much more complicated than it needs to be. And so if we think about this from the predictability standpoint, what else do we get from this? Well, we get a massive increase in security. And so if we have a good understanding of where you're vulnerable, so which CVEs apply to which operating systems, that's going to let you also know when you control the patch levels, when you were vulnerable and when you were not. And you can say, all right, this bug that was a 9.9 CVSS score was available on my fleet for only 14 days. And you can know that if there was only public exploitation of that bug starting after that window, you are safe. You can tell your customers and your coworkers and your insurance adjusters and your IT security folks that you are never subject to that bug in the public view. So those are incredibly valuable tools that will put your CISO at ease, it will put your IT desk at ease, and it will put your investors and your underwriters and your insurers and all of the other businesses that you work with on a day-to-day basis at ease with all of this stuff. It gives you documentation, it gives you reporting material, and it gives you audit controls and audit material. So there's a really important stat here that I want you to take away, because you're not part of the 53%. The 53% of small businesses say either their business doesn't have a plan in place to deal with a cyber attack, or they're not sure if they do. Here's a tip: if you're not sure if you have a plan, you probably don't. So if we think about where this goes, operating system vendors have an imperfect solution to all of these problems. And what you're going to need is something to help manage that chain, because here, we think about the weak link that's out there. And right now, operating system vendors are wholly dependent on user participation from overstimulated, over-notified users who have too much to do, not enough time to do it, not enough time to break to let the updates happen at times that are convenient to their bosses or to their IT departments. They need it when they're convenient to them. You need to message at the right time at the right place. And so you need to make sure that you've got a good solution for this. So how does Apple approach this problem? Apple intends for this solution to be MDM driven. Only supervised Macs, whether they're supervised with user accepted MDM or automated device enrollment, forgive all the acronyms there, can receive a delay command that says, don't do this update right away. Don't even tell the user for 7, 10, 15, 30 days, all the way up to 90 days is the max Apple will let you delay. In addition, only supervised Macs can receive an update command from an MDM that says, please go do this task right now. In addition, Apple is assuming that users will always comply with an update request. We all know that's not true. My favorite story is about a user who, for more than 3 years, for 1,240 days, every day that she used macOS 10.12.4, would go to the upper right-hand corner at 10 a.m. when it alerted her and say, not now. 1,240 days. macOS, Apple also assumes that macOS Monterey's new deferral mechanism is enough for your organization, despite the fact that it didn't really work effectively until about a week and a half ago. So I think, that represents a deficit that somebody like JumpCloud can help solve. How does Microsoft intend for this to work? Microsoft says that Patch Tuesday with periodic quality and feature releases is the way to go. That admins will use GPO or Windows Update for Business to drive updates and restarts, and that users still need to engage with this process and approve restarts, which is a challenge for organizations that have VPN and network requirements, where they're having to talk to an Active Directory server in person still in the year of our Beyonce 2022. We think about all of the different things that represent challenges here. We think there are better ways to approach this problem. And then last but not least, Ubuntu has a very different approach to this as well, where they have a canonical driven catalog of service and quality updates, and that machines are going to get those updates for long-term support releases only. And then last but not least, users are going to have to handle all their own dirty work to make this process happen. And while if you're using Ubuntu on the regular basis, you may be more capable than the average bear, I think that there are better ways to solve this problem. And so to show you how we're approaching this problem, I'm going to turn it over to Scott and say, Scott, take it away.
Thanks so much, Tom. Wow, so much information, so much valuable information. Let's talk about JumpCloud's patch management solution, where the real focus here is to work smarter and not harder, and letting automation drive patch management to save time for you and your organization. To that end, we're on a mission here at JumpCloud. Our Cloud Directory console is one console for IT administration, but we want it to also be one console for all of patch management. And where we started, the tip of the spear with this mission was with OS patch management, the top vulnerability that we can control, as we looked at in the data before. Allowing you to easily schedule and manage these patches is what we're going to dive into today. But as we look towards the future, apps and baselines are absolutely part of the vision that we have for our patch management solution, which we'll save for another webinar. To that end, just to re-highlight and restate the job, whether you manage 100 or 1,000 devices, the job to be done is really the same. Secure these devices and meet your organizational's compliance needs. To that end, what does JumpCloud Patch Management do? How does it help you with this job? Well, this is the solution that aims to give you peace of mind, knowing that this job of ensuring devices are up to date is done. Done without you having to do anything other than check in and ensure that the system is working based on your organization's needs. And if those needs change, a couple clicks will change how those patches are deployed. So let's dive into that. How does JumpCloud Patch Management work? Well, JumpCloud, being a platform that is cross-platform that supports Mac, Windows, and Linux, it's driven by a combination of technology stacks that vary based on the OS type. On Mac, we have MDM and our agent. On Windows, we have an agent. And on Linux, we also have an agent. And what this agent does is it immediately identifies the real-time current state of an operating system, regardless of the enrollment method. Devices can enroll into JumpCloud through our MDM zero-touch workflow, through self-service driven end-user installed workflows now that people are working from home, or through advanced automation scenarios that involve golden imaging and auto-scaling environments. Once the agent's there, your Wild West is found. No longer are you flying blind to the current state of your organization, and you can now use JumpCloud in the console, as well as our robust APIs and reporting schema, to report on the current version of your devices. Now, who doesn't love donuts? We're trying to show you the current environment of your OSs in a schema that's available at a click, where you can see the fleet distribution, the current state of your environment, and really how many operating systems are out in the wild that you need to manage. In addition to this, we try to bring to you the latest releases from the patch that we support. From Mac to Windows and currently Ubuntu for Linux, you'll be able to see a summarized view of those latest releases. Using this information, you can use pre-configured policies that are just a few clicks away to verify the latest releases when they come out. To that end, we have 4 different default groups that range from Vanguard to late adopter, with early adopter and general adopter respectively. And to that end, these are the different ways that you can use ring deployments to ensure that when a patch comes out, you know which devices get it first, hopefully your internal IT team and a few testers, to validate, as Tom talked about, and pilot these releases before they get expanded. Once this validation occurs and you're ready to deploy, additional policies that are as easy as configuring groups and adding devices to these policies allow you to make the deployment of these new patches happen automatically. Your organization's schedule, the times that you specify, and our same defaults allow you to look at the best practices that we've identified and take advantage of these without having to dive into the weeds and say, what is best practice for general adoption? To that end, once the patches go out, the verification of these deployments matters. Being able to show this information is important, and that comes back to the value of the JumpCloud agent, the all-seeing eye, that gathers events every time that the OS version details of a device change and logs very key pieces of metadata. What was the previous OS version? What is the current OS version? When did this occur? And at a high level, you can start to view summaries of how many OS minor version updates happened today, how many OS major versions happened today. This is all designed to be as easy as possible. As a former IT person, I know that the ultimate resource is time. And I can't imagine now with remote work how time has become even more of a constraint. JumpCloud Patch Management is designed to allow you to set it and forget it. And when that time comes where a critical vulnerability comes out, you know exactly where the levers are that you need to turn to get that patch out or get that patch paused if it's not quite ready for production. So what's the end user experience like with our patch management solution? Well, on Mac OS, Tom talked about his phone, those notifications that we've basically just habitually just ignored. I don't know if we see them anymore. On Mac OS, on iPads, on iPhones, this is the technology that dominates our life. Those notifications don't provoke the action or adoption. On our personal computers, we hit not now. On our iPhones, we just dismiss messages. We have new focus modes. Those things don't lead to adoption of OS updates. So we've implemented a much more user-facing prompt that allows users to know that this update has to happen, and they can't pass until this update occurs. The software vendors put us in a position where end user action is required on Mac OS to really get that adoption level high. On the Windows side of the house, with Microsoft absolutely having much more experience in the enterprise space, the default notification schema is the right schema. And per all the Ignite conferences that Microsoft's put out there, less is more with Windows updates. So we're falling into the default patterns that are built into the OS that inform users when they need to restart, when that's going to occur, and following the best practices to ensure that those adoptions happen through, automated settings. From an admin perspective, let's dive into what it's like to manage these inside of JumpCloud. Kind of go behind the slides and look at what actually exists in the console. Well, I talked a little bit about donuts, right? The gamification of patch management is really about giving you visibility in the current state of your operating systems, the distribution of releases, and then getting to that glazed donut, where you have, maybe not a glaze, maybe a half and half, 1 to 2 of the latest OSs in your environment, and you see this based on your active systems. One thing that I know, and that can often happen inside of vendors, is that you're seeing old, stale data. That's something that is not a concept with our fleet visibility dashboard, where the devices that matter to you are the devices that are on and active. And those are the information that we present here. As Tom always likes to say, the most secure device is the one that's off and locked in your drawer. It's not vulnerable, it's not online. Who cares if it's running Mojave? It's not on the internet. The policies that we have exist in a new section inside of JumpCloud Policy Management that are tuned for OS patch management. And the key difference with these policies is that these come with same defaults, where the defaults allow you to easily associate devices to these policies. And from an end user perspective, you've got levers to tune the deferral settings or the required installation settings for macOS. On the Windows side of the house, there's much more capabilities in that rich history of enterprise management from Windows. So in addition to tuning the 4 steps of software install in Windows, download, install, step 1, restart, commit, step 2, you can also target a specific feature release and identify, hey, I don't want devices getting up to Windows 11. So inside of our advanced Windows updates policy, if there are levers that you need for your compliance requirements, these levers exist inside of this policy for you to tune. But if you're just looking for the best practices and basics, the same defaults exist there as well. Now, blue ocean for us is this concept of cross-platform patch management, allowing you easily to allow users to pick the devices that enable them to do their jobs. And we're so excited to introduce Linux patch management to our offering, where end users who may be more productive working from a Linux machine, you can now offer this to them, which may be a cost saving to your organizations without having to compromise on security, and take advantage of the same command and control over deferring and installing updates for the specific Ubuntu OS. To that end, I just want to reiterate what the value proposition is with our patch management software. And it's about giving you time, allowing you to easily set and schedule and manage all of your OS updates and have visibility, automation, and reporting that backs it up. This is going to strengthen your organization's compliance needs while giving you back time to focus on those critical jobs of IT, which is much more than nagging users to click the button and do the update. To that end, I'd love to know what we can talk about, how we can open this up to some chat. So I'll pass the mic over to my colleagues monitoring the chat, and let's dig into some of the key questions that hopefully have popped up during this talk.
Thank you, Scott. That was awesome presentation from you, Scott, and also from Tom. So again, now we're opening up the Q&A session. Please put in your question in the chat forum and we can go through them. And I have one question here that asks, on Mac side, there is currently no way to specify which version you want the device to get. For example, what if I still do not want to upgrade to Monterey and still want to stay in 11.6.5? And then, but currently the 11.6.5 version hides under more updates, right? So users tend to click on Monterey update instead of Big Sur update. So will that be a feature to control this coming soon?
Scott, I'm going to let you take this one. This is your bailiwick.
Absolutely. So a big part, right, of understanding how Apple does the controls is some of the limitations they offer from a command and control perspective. And Tom, keep me honest here, but 90 days after a new major release comes out, no longer can you hide that major release from being available to the system. So
Correct.
We absolutely identify that more info, which is actually one of 2 more infos that's displayed on that page, is kind of like, the the speakeasy to figure out where to stay on the current version. You've got to know where the button is and where the door is to get that drink. We are actively working on enhancing our policy to make sure that users that are on macOS 11 know where they need to go to stay with their latest version on macOS 11. And to that end, that enhancement is on the chopping block in the engineering team's hands, and we expect it to be out within the quarter. Another thing you can do is you can combine existing policies to prevent the upgrade to Monterey, and connecting that block macOS Monterey policy with the patch management policy puts you completely in the driver's seat over command and control over when a device can upgrade to Monterey. So a lot to unpack there, but to summarize, we recognize that more info is hard to get to. Our notification will very soon drive users to this more info if they're on macOS 11, and including that with our block policy can give you control to prevent users from upgrading to that latest version, regardless of if they're a standard or an admin user.
Right, thanks, Scott. We have a few questions asking about patch management release date. So our patch management solution is already generally available since March 24th. The initial release here is we're focusing on OS, right, patching, but then throughout the rest of the year, we'll look at browser and app patching. So Linux was just released last week, April 18, in preparation for Ubuntu 22.04. And so you're welcome to use that if you're one of our customers. And in terms of the packaging and pricing, it's actually currently available as an a la carte under our pricing SKU. So you do need to have device management as one of the SKU before you purchase patch management.
And folks are welcome to try that policy for a fair use period. And I was going to say there's cues in the UI now to talk with you exactly about what you can do with this policy while you're testing it. So please feel free to give this policy a test drive. Give us your feedback. We love getting feature requests, and we love hearing how our customers are using the product and how they want to use the product. So please don't hesitate to drop us an email or use the submit an idea feature that's available in the admin portal to help drive those things. And again, it is available as an a la carte add-on for all of our packages.
Cool. And then another question here for Mac OS, is patch management able to push specific supplemental updates?
I'm glad you asked about this because Apple has changed the way in which they version the operating system. Starting with macOS Big Sur, every release changes the point release of the device. So that where we used to see, 10.15.7 with Catalina and the supplemental update 1 and the supplemental update 2 and the supplemental update 3 and then some security updates on top of that, but the build number never changes. That's no longer the case as of macOS Big Sur. And so we support for patch management for macOS Big Sur and macOS Monterey, but not for macOS Catalina as it stands. And Catalina will be end of life this year. We wanted to focus our engineering attention on the operating systems that are currently under development by Apple. And so when we started this process, that was Big Sur. When we shipped this process, it was macOS Monterey. Those are the two operating systems on the macOS side that we support today.
Okay, what about Windows and Macs? Do they provide any log of patching? Patching log?
So thanks for asking that, because I'm so excited to say that the rich reporting baseline of the Cloud Directory platform is Directory Insights. And included in this is from every service in the platform, whether it's Radius, LDAP, user management, admin, or user logins, is a time-based log of what's occurring in your organization. To that end, we're now pulling in these rich data points for when devices patch, which is really truly kind of completing the loop of what these policies do. The policies posture the device relative to the update service, but the update occurs based on that posture. When the update occurs, the agent, because it's there and it's the all-seeing eye, will now log these events to the Directory Insights update service. And this raw material, which we've just started to build in the past couple of weeks, is starting to build up. I'm excited to say that there's some very cool visuals and reports that will be coming based on this raw material that give you the ability to hand a report to an auditor that says, hey, here's the last 30 days of patches for our organization, timestamps for when they occurred, and verifications that you know that your organization is secure and compliant using these easy to use policies.
So our audience here, they are very happy that OS patching is already available, but they still need to want to know what about software and app patching? When is that coming?
Absolutely. So we talked about the tip of the spear, right? Well, this tip of the spear is going to be the operating system. It's where your users are. It's where they interact. A new employee starts the company. What are they given? No longer really a pass to the office. They're shipped a computer, and that's where it starts. We're completing that job and also starting to think about the next phase, which is, what is the next job? Where's the next place that the user lives once they fire up that device? And we're very excited to focus on the browser. Where are we now? Well, I'm in GoToWebinar, but I guess that some people went to the browser to launch this link. And I'd almost guarantee that many of you likely have your browsers up and maybe have been multitasking while we're here. So ensuring the browser is secure and up to date is a job that we're keen to get after. And as we alluded to our mission on an earlier slide, that's the direction that we'll be going in the second half of the year, where I can't wait to join you all again to bring you up to speed on how that feature works in a future webinar.
Awesome. And then one user wants to know, can we set an OS Max cap? Or is this simply just going to install the latest version of Windows or Mac? For instance, can I set it up so that you would only install Mac OS 12.3 instead of Mac OS 12.3.1?
Sure. So based on that example, I think that the really important thing for us to say here is that the Apple will let us prevent a minor version, so going from 12.3 to 12.3.1 for up to 90 days. After 90 days, the user will be shown that update. And the user does not need to be an admin to commit that update to their system. So there is only a limit of the version of the operating system that we can push you to. So since these policies are automations, and since these policies are designed to keep your fleet up to date, we are going to point you at the version of the operating system that is most secure, which is the most recent version of this operating system. Now, we talked a little bit about why automated patching was maybe not the best thing for your fleet and why you might want to have a software delay. But we don't think that you should lock that window in place forever. If there's a reason that you don't want to go to 12.3.1, you ought to be able to have the right to delay and essentially move all of your device groups into the late adopters policy for that period of time. There are good ways to make that happen. And so you can just assign, unassigned groups from the, Vanguard policy or from the early adopters policy or from the GA policy and put them in that late adopters group while you figure out an issue with a piece of VPN software or a really key piece of the line of business softwares that your environment continues or considers. But we can only keep you there for about 90 days before Apple takes that choice away from us and essentially says, I'm going to point you at 12.3.1 because that was the update that was current 90 days ago. So we get some levers of control here, but they're all about device groups and assigning them to policies. So, and this is also true if you had a situation here for a 0 day. You could move everybody up to the early adopters window because it's serious enough that you want to get that update deployed within 72 hours. You have those choices. And when it comes to Windows, I'm going to hand off to Scott.
Yeah, so again, Tom's done a great job explaining the levers on Mac. The levers on Windows are quite similar in the sense that there's maximum deferrals in terms of the number of days. And I believe, I'm going to put the number above 100. I think it's 120 what the maximum deferral is. But the difference on Windows is that you can specify a feature update for a set or group of devices, with the hard stop being that a device will not roll back to a previous feature update. If you say, hey, let's not get to Windows 11, let's stay on Windows 10 21H2, Windows 11 devices will not accept that policy. By setting that, those devices are now postured to only receive those quality updates for that specific feature update. So there's a little bit more command and control on the Windows side of the house, but also recognizing that they do, because if we think back to what the recommendations are, vendors want you to get to the latest. If you're being held back from getting to the latest because a piece of software is driven to only work on Windows XP, it's probably time to reevaluate that piece of software and dive into that vendor relationship rather than holding your organization back from getting to the latest update and being secure. So just want to highlight that there's a push and pull between, ensuring software works and securing your organization, where from a responsibilities perspective, that no security incidents, no security incidents really needs to be the P0 that we drive for from an IT perspective.
Right, and we have another good question here. Is there any additional detail that we can share at a high level on the high level differences in our patch management OSs between Windows, Mac, and Linux? Are they all at feature parity, or are there some features not available based on the OS type?
Sure.
Yeah.
And so, this is a great place for us to have a great conversation. I think that, if we look at our Windows updates, we can force you to complete that process. We can take you all the way through the update being applied, because Microsoft's got a really painless way to handle that. Apple doesn't have a great painless way to do that. We can deliver an update via the MDM and say, install ASAP. The user will not be notified that update is in process. They will not be given a chance to save their work. It will just restart their computer when it is ready to go. That could be a hugely negative operation for your organization if that were to hit your sales director while they were in the middle of a presentation, or if it hit the CFO while they were working on next year's budget and hadn't saved the Excel doc in the last 5 seconds. So there are a lot of trade-offs there. We're looking at better solutions for that. They're not in the product today. So we are reliant on focusing on getting the user to do that task appropriately. Don't worry, we're not done yet. We've got a lot of great things to come there. We've definitely got some good opportunities there to enhance the product to match Windows's abilities. On the Linux front, Ubuntu offers us the ability to tie this just to security releases or as well as feature releases, and that's a different kind of environment than either macOS or Windows directly have. Most of the feature updates that are present, as opposed to the security updates, they all kind of get tied into different release cycles, whereas the Ubuntu policy is much more platform specific at this point. So we tried to take a very platform specific approach and to use the best parts of what each platform makes available.
Awesome. And then one attendee wants to know how can he or she leverage JumpCloud to enforce Catalina user to upgrade to Monterey, right? Since they are practically remote working these days all over the world, so it's not an option for them to go into the office to do that upgrade. Yeah,
this is certainly a topic near and dear to our heart, and we're looking for great options here for how to get those 10.15.7 users up to macOS 12 and beyond. So keep your eyes posted. We'll have a lot more to say later in the year.
All right, still filtering some of the question. All right, there's one here. I need to update around 20 Windows VM at a time. No user action should be needed since this is a production area and we have a few hours of maintenance windows each week. So is this possible? And I also already have the agent running on all existing JumpCloud account. So this is an existing customer asking this question.
Absolutely. As Tom talked about, we have the lever to do all of the update process on Windows up until your device will automatically restart at this time. So to that end, for these devices, these servers, VMs in your case, using the policies and the more aggressive settings to do them at a certain time, this is something that is absolutely in the wheelhouse when it comes to the capabilities for Windows, which kind of piggybacks off that previous conversation we had about feature parity across the OSs. Windows has the most feature when it comes down to being able to have control over everything. And to that end, in addition to these policies, if you wanted to do it at a certain time, also take advantage of the agent. Take advantage of what the agent can do, where we now have these remote security commands. And you could say, in the maintenance window, I know that I've got these updates installed and ready for restart. If you want to take control over the process, go into the devices side and send those restart commands to the devices. And you have command and control over the state of that device and that patch installing, taking advantage of the platform in different pieces, using the agent with the policy. If, for example, the use case is we've got a maintenance window, it needs to happen now. That's where, if you think about the P word and the platform word, there's so many tools for power and control at your disposal using the agent and the other parts of the platform that you can now pair with this patch management offering to get the job done.
Thank you, Scott. And then we'll probably have time for one last question. Let me take a look here. Okay, is there any work underway to work on CIS hardening policy for Mac and all Windows devices?
You see Scott and I both smiling here, because boy, is this a topic area of intense interest here at JumpCloud. So while I can't commit to anything, and I won't, I will certainly let you know that, benchmarking, specifically CIS, specifically, other tools like the latest NIST special bulletins, 800-219, a couple of other, areas are certainly part of what we're looking at in terms of how we can establish baselining and compliance.
Yeah, hopefully you're at least happy that it's on our radar. So we're
Yes.
all thinking alike. So that's cool.
Keep an eye out on future quarterly webinars with the plan.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with that, I think thank you everybody for your attendance and all your awesome questions. Keep them coming even after this webinar. Remember to accounts@jumpcloud.com or reach out to your CSM or AM with a question, or even join us tomorrow for the IT hours, where again, like I said, Scott and Tom and Josh, actually our PM for Linux, will be there to talk about patch management. Again, join our Slack chat community, the lounge, just to ask more questions and keep them coming. And with that, I'm just going to end this webinar, and hopefully we'll see you again pretty soon. Thank you, everybody, and
Thanks
have
so
a
much.
good day.
Yeah, thanks, friends. Be well.
Please subscribe and check out more content from us.